Welcome to Total Drawing Blending with Oil Paint. Using the stitching stroke, learn about edge quality, and make a comparison of bristle brush uses. You will need a small canvas or canvas panel, a long-handled bristle brush, a brush meant for oil painting, and a small short-handled brush, usually meant for watercolor. You may also need a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch mop brush, or you can use a watercolor wash brush. You'll need black oil paint and white oil paint. Let's get started. I'm going to begin with a circle, since a circle is the basic shape that the sphere is based on. I'll be relatively careful with my circle, but there's plenty of time to sharpen and clarify that shape in the paint. And for today's lesson, we're just going to simply draw a sphere resting on a simple surface. Now, hopefully you'll see these very light dotted lines that I've laid in across my circle: highlight, light, medium, shadow, and reflected light. I also have values mixed up that correspond. We'll call the values from white around to dark gray 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I've started with value number 3 in the area on my sphere that we're going to call reflected light. It's still on the dark side. As you can see, my light source comes from the top right corner of my picture plane. I'm using value number 5 now. It's not black, more of a charcoal gray, as the core of my shadow, the darkest dark. Since my sphere is resting on a surface, some light may bounce back up into the dark side of the sphere to create the reflected light. You can see now that all of the values are in place, and that I've actually used value number 2 for the highlight, as this is not a very light sphere. Now I'll switch to a small watercolor brush. It has soft bristles and doesn't move the paint around very much. And I'm going to wiggle my brush or stitch strokes back and forth across the border or the seam between the reflected light and the core of the shadow, and I'll do this to each border between each value. The stitching stroke extends into each value as far as you discover you need to go to create a smooth gradation. It's okay to add small amounts of paint as long as you've started very thinly, and we want to paint thinly in this process. You can add small amounts of paint to even out the gradation of your sphere without the paint becoming so thick that you have visible brush strokes. I'll switch to either a mop brush or a watercolor wash brush. In this case, I'll use the mop brush and basically dust my sphere. A mop brush is super soft, and the oil paint is quite heavy in its body. The mop brush is not able to move the oil paint very well, but what it does do is knock the brush strokes down and help to even out the gradation. There we are. Now the gray stripes have been blended together using soft bristle brushes, both the stitching stroke and with the dusting of a mop brush across the surface of the sphere. Now this video is also about edge quality, and so I'm going to paint a cast shadow underneath my sphere. This is the shadow that would be cast onto the surface on which the sphere rests, and a hallmark of cast shadows is that they're soft around their edges, and they actually are softest the farthest they are from the object that casts them. Typically, cast shadows are also darker closer to the object that casts them. I'm using my watercolor brush now and just dragging it back and forth across the seam between value number 1, which I've used for my table, and value number 3, which was the base value for the shadow. You can see where I've added a little bit of value number 1 into the tip of the cast shadow so that it's a little lighter at its tip and also softer. When we're finished, we want the shadow to be softer around the edge than the sphere. That'll help the sphere to look extra real. I'm just using values 3, 4, and 5 across the background to create a gradation. It could be solid, but I like the gradation. Just mixing more and more of value number 3 into value number 5 on the left side of the background until I reach a value that I'm happy with. This is personal preference. I just want to make sure my sphere shows up well. I'm going to use my mop brush and knock down some of those strokes. And I'll also soften the back edge of the table surface. It's okay if what's in the background feels a little soft or maybe a little bit out of focus. Again, the soft edges around my sharper sphere will help the sphere to look even more real. There we are. You may have to wipe your brush off, get some of the extra paint off when you're smoothing out or blurring an edge together. Thanks for watching Blending Oil Paint at TotalDrawing.com.